All right, everybody. We'll get started here. There may be some people join us late, which is fine. I'll just do a quick introduction here. Appreciate everybody joining us. We've got a couple of really great people here to talk to us about kind of balancing high-level academics with high-level athletics. So Dan Bockelman and Scott Flynn are here with us this evening, and both competed in the Cornell University Lacrosse program, as well as graduated from the pre-med program. Scott's currently a freshman at Tufts Medical School after scoring in the top 5% in the MCAT, and Dan scored in the top 4% of the MCAT after he graduated from Cornell. So really great to have these guys with us. You know, we know firsthand how challenging it is to navigate being a college athlete. You know, right now, every high school student athlete wants to be recruited, but the challenges of working day to day in a collegiate atmosphere is something that very few young men and women are truly prepared for. It's one thing to be prepared physically, but are you prepared mentally for college athletics? And we'll talk about that today. And I know for myself personally, having played Division I baseball, it was really eye-opening for me to come in my freshman year and be expected to wake up at 5 a.m. to work out, go to class all day, go to practice for several hours after class, hustle over to dinner, get to the library for the mandatory study hall, and try and have some semblance of life as well. So kind of learning how to balance all of that and maintain good grades while also ensuring that I was improving on the field was very challenging. And so our goal for this webinar is to help high school upperclassmen, high school student athletes to understand the challenges of the student athlete experience. You know, what are the skills and resources that you guys need to have to succeed at the next level? Dan and Scott did both. They succeeded both academically and athletically at the Ivy League level. So I guess kind of to get started here, you know, Dan and Scott, Dan, maybe you can start. Just what factors, we'll start with what factors played into where you decided to go to college, and did you always know you wanted to go to medical or graduate school? I'll let you to answer that, Dan, and then Scott, maybe the same as well.
Yeah, sure. So I knew from early in high school that I was very interested in the sciences. I took AP Bio in 10th grade, which is earlier than most people did. So I kind of had that drive in the first place. So I wanted to go to a school that was great academically in the first place, but come junior year, I kind of got in the recruiting circuit late, and I thought that using a sport would be a great way to get me to where I want to go. So my two offers from recruiting were just Cornell and Amherst, and I thought Amherst is a great school, but I thought for me personally, a fit of a bigger school would be better, a larger student population. So that was kind of where I factored in. And then it being D1 versus D3 was kind of part of competitive for me. I thought that that would be the route that I would want to go. So that's kind of how I factored in. I don't know what I would have done if recruiting hadn't worked out, but my goal was to go to a better academic institution in the first, from the start.
Scott, is that kind of similar for you? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I was pretty mature when I was in high school, like a lot of people are. I really just wanted to play lacrosse at the highest level. Cornell was the best school that I got recruited to. I think in retrospect, it ended up working out where it ended up being an awesome school, and I'm thankful that that worked out that way. But I think that's also why we're here too, is because I think we want to give you guys a little bit of perspective. You know, it wasn't really until my senior year of college where I understood, you know, that athletics really got me really far in life and put me in a place where I could succeed later. I didn't necessarily have that perspective in high school, and I wish I did, and I wish I had it earlier on in college, as I think we'll get into much later the talk. You know, I definitely had some ups and downs early in my college career, and you know, I think there's ways you can choose the school that you want to go to that will best enable you to have success, and whether that's D3, D1, just kind of juggling what your goals are, manage your expectations, and and all that. So I wouldn't say I had the most concrete plan going in, but it worked out, and I think it gives me a little bit of perspective on other people in high school and what they might want to look for in a college if they want a more academic or science-based or even business, even anything really, just a more serious future after college, because sports really do end. And I think most of us here aren't going to go pro, especially, I mean, I was a lacrosse player, so that was never really an option, but I still had that in mind. And yeah, exactly.
Thanks. Kind of staying with you, Scott. So just maybe can you describe your experience both athletically at Cornell and academically, and kind of what challenges did you maybe find that you didn't expect in both sides?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge, honestly, for young college athletes, especially the freshman year, is the mental aspect. The time is obviously huge, but I think a lot of people go in expecting it to be a lot of time. They're definitely surprised by how much time is involved in athletics. But for me, coming in as a freshman, you know, everyone thinks they're going to be the superstar. Everyone thinks they're going to light up the scoreboard or whatever the equivalent of your sport is. And maybe not doing as well and having a lot of transitional like bumps going in can affect your schoolwork really. And managing that early on will help you not have any pitfalls. So I think for me, it really was that mental aspect where when I wasn't doing well in the field and when I wasn't living up to my own expectations in the field early on, I wasn't doing as well academically. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of young athletes. And later on, I kind of was able to put that aside and just really separate the two, because that's really what you need to do. And I found that once you do that, you actually end up doing better on the field as well, because you're doing better in school. So you're just less stressed. You're less stressed about your tests. You're less stressed about your homework, and you can kind of just compartmentalize both aspects of your life and perform better in both.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I think that
just to go off that point, Scott.
Yeah.
From my perspective, like my actual route, I came in as an attackman and started out freshman year thinking the whole fall that like maybe I'd start, and then we had a transfer come in that played over me, and mentally I didn't handle it well, and it kind of, like they say, when you're negative about one thing, it's like infectious. It can make all your thoughts negative about your situation. So I think like looking back, I'd wish like I'd been more positive about the situation and had like a better perspective. And eventually I ended up changing positions, and that's how I saw playing time and how I felt like I could contribute. Like sometimes you're going to be asked things that you necessarily didn't think you would ever be asked to do. I switched to defense, which is a completely different position, but they said your skill set is better for this. So I think this is how, if you want to play, this is how you will play. Otherwise you won't. So it's kind of like accepting your role within your team, kind of my perspective there.
No, it makes sense. I mean, you got, when you're playing high school sports and you're getting recruited to go play in college, normally when you get to college, it's made up of everybody's, they were always the best in their high school, whatever the sport may be, tennis, baseball, lacrosse, whatever it is. So now you've got a team full of best high school players. You know, now it's okay, how do you elevate yourself? And so that's a good point, Dan. It's just being able to pivot when you're asked to, and stay positive and continue working hard. And that's kind of the same thing in the classroom, right? Like you come in and you're used to high school where you've got to figure it out. You have your systems, you have your routine, you know how to study for high school, class and tests and exams. And now you get to college and it's in a whole new situation. And how do I pivot my study habits? So, because learning and succeeding in college on the academic side is much different than in high school. So I guess, Dan, kind of continuing here, what are maybe some scheduling strategies or other things, resources that you leveraged in college on the academic side to make your studying more efficient and your academics more successful?
So I'll start out by saying that everyone has their own like learning style and different strategy. And I can say from having lived with Scott and us being on similar paths that we didn't necessarily have the same exact study habits, but I think what he can correct me, it's easy to plan like maybe week by week, like what are your deadlines, like find specific times in the day ahead of time that you want to do specific projects or homework or study for tests. So it's planning out very specific times, maybe in between classes, right before a lift, after dinner, like thinking about when you're going to do specific things, not just saying, oh, I'll sit down and study, like planning out like very specifically what you're going to do on any given day or with any given like hour slot. That was very helpful for me because freshman fall when I was struggling was just saying, oh, I'll study after practice, and like didn't really think about what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan of attack for like what I was going to do ahead of time. So I think that's one strategy that was very helpful, just being organized with what you have on your plate.
And I think too, I mean, you know, being a high level athlete and being someone that wants to excel, continue to excel in college, you have to, you can't just, do the bare minimum. You have to, you have your scheduled lifts, you have your scheduled practice, but we all know that if you're going to be an impact player, you've got to do additional time, spend additional time in the weight room. You got to spend additional time practicing your individual skills. So there's even more time that's spent outside of the scheduled time between classes and meals and, study hall and whatever else you may have. So, it's really in order to succeed, because we want to talk about how to succeed at a high level in academics and athletics. It's, what did you guys do to Scott, coming to you, I guess, from an athletic standpoint, what additional, what did you do additionally to improve your skills while at college? And then how did you find time to do all that? I mean, it's creating that time is a unique skill set.
Yeah, I think kind of going off what Dan said, Google Calendar was definitely my best friend after my first semester. And not necessarily, I would definitely highly recommend putting in all the small stuff because realistically, you're not going to really forget like when your test is going to be. That's obviously important to put on and schedule study time for that, but it's all about the little homework assignments that can nitpick your grade and can really be bring your grade down way below what you want. I think it's also about just finding your sweet spot. So what I mean by that is for me, I really enjoy studying in the morning, and I feel like getting it done early before I go to practice is just makes me so much more efficient. Some people on our team, I know, they felt like after practice, their blood was pumping, their mind was active, and they felt like they could go to the library after that, and that was their most efficient time. And it is a little bit of trial and error. There isn't like one kind of magic answer, but it's all about just really kind of just through self-reflection early on in the semester, realizing like, when I'm reading this, am I really comprehending what's going on? Am I just doing it just to say I've done it, or am I understanding what I'm reading or understanding what I'm doing? And for me, I didn't really understand that until probably my second semester. But if I was a little more, introspective, I guess I would have realized that earlier, and my grades would have improved a lot. So at my daily schedule, usually I'd wake up super early, get all my needed assignments done. Usually before noon. The way our practice schedule worked out, we worked out and stuff later in the day, so it worked out perfectly. If you work out in the morning, then maybe right after your workouts, you get in the library before your classes in the afternoon or something like that. But it really is about just finding your sweet spot and not wasting any time, because it's really easy to waste time in college, and making sure you get all of your stuff, your needed stuff done before all your fun stuff can pay huge dividends in the long run.
Great. Yeah. And kind of talking about the learning how to balance everything. I know for me personally, I would always go to my coach, say, hey, coach, what am I supposed to do here? I don't know. I have class. We have our workout scheduled. How do I balance if there's conflicts, whether it be games or practices? I have I've missed too many of these classes because we've been traveling. I mean, who are some of your kind of key resources in college, both kind of academically and athletically? Maybe Dan, if you want to hit that one.
Yeah, sure. So luckily, our team and our athletic department and academics, they were pretty helpful with that. Like there weren't that many times when we had to miss things for sports, but if you had a class that I know a lot of the econ majors had a night class that they had to take for their degree, and it was at 7:30 at night in the middle of practice. And those practices, the coaches would be like, fine, like you can leave early. Like they were very supportive with that. For missing classes, for games, for traveling, the professors were always helpful. A lot of the times during finals, when we were traveling for playoff games, they'd let players take the tests on the road and have the coaches proctor. So it was like a lot of email communication, and everyone was pretty helpful at that. So as long as you have a concern and ask for it, generally the people in your life will help support you with figuring out a compromise or a better situation. So that's just my perspective from that.
Yeah. And again, I think all of this is key to do early on. So if you know that you're playing an away game or some big game on the road and you have a test that day, talk to your professor early on, right? So then they know that you might have to take it on the road or they might have to accommodate you. I think also your teammates can definitely be a huge resource. I mean, me and Dan were lucky that we were both teammates in the same class, and we use each other as resources, I think, more than anything else. Also some other classmates or some other team members that were a year older than us or 2 years older than us. But I think whatever major, you probably are not alone. Your team size might not be as large as ours, but there's probably someone else on your team who's gone through the exact same thing. Maybe he's an alumni or he or she is an alumni that graduated a couple of years ago, but reach out to your coach. And I think the best resource are honestly your teammates and your alumni, because they've been through it. And I think there is obviously a lot of administration that have your back, and you can reach out to them, and they are a great resource because they kind of know the ins and outs of the school, but they weren't necessarily students either. So I think having that student perspective is extremely important in addition to the kind of official administration support as well.
Great. A question: did you guys ever have any doubts about your career path while you were in college? I mean, pre-med program, Division I sports. I mean, certainly there had to have been a period of time where you're like, "What am I doing? This is crazy." Any thoughts on that, or how you managed that, maybe?
Yeah, I think.
You go, Scott. It's fine.
All right. Well, I wanted to make sure I kind of put this in there because my course through college was very up and down. And I think going into college, I was a pre-med. I wanted to go to medical school, but I changed tracks a lot. And that's totally okay. I was scared of being pre-med and an athlete. I knew it was going to be hard. And I was scared of failing. So I was, contemplating being an econ major, and I did have doubts. And I think the biggest thing to do about doubts is to flesh out those doubts. If you have a doubt about it, then try to get some resources in that career path and see what it's like to see whether you really think it's for you. For me, like I was thinking about being an econ major. I did some externships in the city, really decided it wasn't for me, shouted at a few doctors and realized, this really is the path that I wanted. So I switched back to pre-med my sophomore year, and I got back on that path. So, as a college student, high school student, you're not really going to know what the career entails unless you go out there and at least observe. And even then, you're not going to totally know exactly the ins and outs of the profession, but at least it'll give you a better idea and help manage those doubts a little bit and cement in your mind what you want to do.
Right. And to bounce off of that, unless you are in a college or a program that's very rigid, you have generally a lot of room in the courses that you can take. And even with a pre-med major like we had the opportunities to take courses that were completely different. And often that's encouraged by, at least for us, medical schools, to do something different, take history or sociology or something completely unrelated to biology, chemistry, et cetera. So like to go off of what Scott said, experience is necessary to know what you want to do with your life and what courses you're interested in, what topics you're passionate about. So if you are having doubts about maybe econ isn't for me, take one course in something else and see if it's interesting to you, or that it's part of a career that you might want, that you're doubting. And if it's not, then that's fine too. Then you have a valuable experience that you could talk about in whatever career you go into.
Thanks. Yeah. So just you mentioned kind of internships and summer activities. I mean, kind of in terms of internship opportunities, I know that a lot of times in the summer athletes can feel like they're kind of pulled in two different directions. How did you manage your summers and time outside of school to make sure you were kind of set up for life post-graduation, but also, maintain your athletic standards as well? Dan or Scott?
Yeah, so my regret in terms of dealing with the med school application process now is that I didn't take the opportunities until later, because that's the weak point of my application, is that I don't have as many experiences. I spent 2 summers coaching and working out, and I think I kind of forfeited some opportunities that would have been better for me professionally in the future. And then the summer before my senior year, I stayed on campus and worked in a lab while also working out. So I know a lot of our teammates had internships and still found time to exercise and stay in shape and get ready for the fall. I would say, Scott, how many people had internships in New York City in our class every summer? It was the majority.
And this can also be something that helps choose, not necessarily choose which school you go to, but a lot of different programs put different emphasis on like post-graduation success. A lot of schools really just care about the current athletic performance and don't really look into where their students might go after. So that's something you should definitely ask the coach and see if there's an alumni organization set up for their team, because we had one and it was excellent. It was amazing. And I didn't know that going in, but that would have been a huge recruiting thing, a recruiting factor for me, especially knowing that I wanted to go into medicine. So don't be afraid to reach out to the coaches that are recruiting you or anything, and kind of get a vibe of what they, how they view their athletes. If they view them as, they want them to be successful in the future and they will do everything they can, and that's your number one resource is your alumni network and your the people at the school who are willing to help you. Great.
I think one thing I'd like to maybe ask you both to do is just for the high school students that are on here now and those that are hopeful of playing college athletics, just one kind of takeaway, one practical advice, some recommendations maybe for them from each of you to kind of prepare now and get ready for kind of college athletics and college academics.
I would say number one skill is prepare to fail, because you will fail. You'll probably fail multiple times. It's all about how you respond. That's the biggest thing. And that is really a life skill, honestly. It's not just athletics. It's definitely pours into academics. But a lot of high school athletes, me included, a lot of times you don't fail in high school. You kind of have high school figured out. You do very well. You do well academically. You do well athletically. You should go into college, no matter how highly recruited you are, no matter how smart you are. Expect to fail and expect to rebound. Don't let it kill your motivation, because that can definitely derail your goals if you don't respond accordingly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Failures aren't really failures; they're just learning opportunities, I would say, if I could sum that up. But another thing I think that I take away from it is just attention to detail. I mean, like I said before, like you need to know what's on your plate athletically and academically. Let's say a coach, you can ask a coach, what can I do to be better? What area am I weak in? And then think about how you can improve on that. Academically, you do poorly on a test, you can go to office hours and say, how do I solve this problem better? How do I think about this differently? And I think asking for help and paying attention to a different perspective from someone else on you is very important.
So I agree as well that failure is not, it's not if, it's more when, and it kind of, that resiliency is important. When you guys failed, and Scott, I'll start with you. When you failed, as I'm sure you did many times, what did you do to kind of pull yourself up from that? What skill set did you kind of rely on to help you kind of pick yourself up and move forward?
I think just being, you have to be introspective, and you have to realize why you failed, where you failed, and how you failed, right? So for me, I think I was a little too focused on the athletic aspect. And kind of going back to what I said in the beginning, I think the key thing for me to rebound from my failure was just to really compartmentalize my life and not let my academics leak into my athletics, because that was dragging me down. It wasn't doing good things for me, and I think kind of learning from your failures is the biggest thing to succeeding later.
Got it. And then we talk about like goal setting. Dan, I mean, how important was that for you? I assume it was very important on the athletic side, but also on the academic side. I mean, is that something that you spent a lot of time doing, just kind of writing out your goals and trying to keep focus on those?
Yeah, that's definitely something I do. Maybe I should have written it out, because then maybe I would have achieved more of them. But I think thinking about it in your head is very important. Maybe for a specific class, you want a specific grade, and you say, okay, what are the steps to achieve the goal, is just as much important as the goal itself, is writing out what steps you need to get there. Let's say you want, in the athletic side, you want to bench a certain amount or run a certain time. What do you need to do to get there? How many times a week do you need to work at it? How many hours do you need to spend in the library to get a certain grade? Do you need to ask for help in any area? I think the steps are just as important as the goal itself. So that's kind of how I looked at it.
Great. Thanks, guys. I think at this point, I'd like to open it up if there's any questions from any of our listeners. We'll spend a few minutes kind of going through those, so you can feel free to unmute yourself and speak freely, or type your question in the chat area if you don't want to speak. But we'll give it a couple minutes and see what questions come through, and then I'll wrap up here. I got a question here. How many hours a week did you need to put into lacrosse in college? Would you know what the weekly demand is at a D3 school? Can either of you answer that?
So from our perspective, the Ivy League was a little bit different than other D1 schools in and of itself. We didn't have practice every day in the fall. We had maybe 2 hours of lifts, and we were limited for our outdoor practice time. But I know at other schools, they have practice every day, maybe every morning, 2 or 3 hour practices. And within that, you have lifts. So what do you think the hours in a week?
I don't know.
Tough to say.
It's the concrete number isn't necessarily as important. I think, especially coming from an Ivy League, we did have a ton of restrictions on how many times we could practice. And again, that's something you should look into when you're choosing your school, is if they're from an Ivy League or NESPEC school, they're going to have some restrictions. So they're going to allow the schoolwork kind of to take precedent over athletics a little bit, just inherently in the school. I think when it comes to Division I versus Division III, Division III will definitely have less of a hourly work week for sure. I think that's pretty much across the board. Your falls will definitely be a lot more lax. So if you want to play Division I lacrosse or really Division III lacrosse, and really I think any sport, you can schedule it out so that maybe some of your harder courses are not in season. I know me and Dan definitely both did that, even though our falls were also pretty intense. But I think that's a big strategy. In terms of hours, I can't tell you necessarily hours, because I think it also really depends on what your goals are athletically. You know, like you might have a certain hours of lifts and practices and everything, but realistically, to get to your goals athletically, you're going to put in even more, and what you put in, you're going to get out. So it's hard to say the exact amount of hours, because it kind of ebbs and flows per week. And you know, a lot of the star players were putting in multiple hours after practice, just putting in extra work. And our coach obviously encouraged that as well. So it's hard to give you a concrete number, but Division I will be more. Division III will definitely be less, especially in the off season.
Yeah, my brother is Division III, and it's definitely less of a time commitment in the fall, but relatively the same in the spring, because it's practice every day and then traveling.
Couple more questions here. What did you do to train over the summer going into your freshman year of college?
I think probably the best thing you can do is reach out to the coach and try to get some athletic packet. They might not be able to give it to you because there might be some regulations, but maybe you can reach out to a player and get your hands on just maybe like one workout that they do, just to get a vibe of what their layout's like. And I think you want to go into the fall. I mean, the way it was described to me, at least, going in is you might not be able to catch, if you cannot catch and throw, but if you can pass all the run tests and be able to perform just a purely athletic basis, you're going to be in a good shape. So I think the best shape I've ever been in, honestly, was probably going into freshman year. That just put me in a better spot. I think it set me up for success in the future.
Yeah, definitely preparing for, I would assume most teams have a test that, like for our example, we had a conditioning test that you basically needed to pass right when you get there. And it's easier than the one that they consider the real test, but preparing for that is like a big help of getting an idea of where you are athletically in terms of what to be expecting.
Right. Yeah, I think just to add on that too, just from my experience, I think the biggest difference between my freshman year and my sophomore year was realizing that my physical abilities were not up to par with the rest of the team. I mean, you come out of high school and you're the best, right? You got to figure it out. You're the best player, you're whatever. But then you get to college and everybody's bigger, faster, stronger than you. So recognizing that you need to kind of ramp it up. So if you can do that kind of leading into your freshman year and get ahead of that, you're probably better positioned to take advantage of the opportunities right away. Question here: how did you make sure colleges noticed you in high school, and when did your recruiting start? Maybe Dan, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, sure. For me, my experience, I said before, I was a little bit later in terms of recruiting. That I started reaching out late in the cycle in my junior year. So for lacrosse, it's been happening a little bit earlier, and the NCAA is trying to like regulate it. But for our sport specifically, it was a lot of summer, maybe joining a team, or like the travel summer circuit was important for colleges, for college recruiting. That's where they all go. I can speak from our coach's perspective that summer is the busiest time of year for them. They're all over the place, all over the country, looking for people. So I think that, at least in terms of our sport, that was the case. So if you play a different sport, then I would find out like what the equivalent is. Like, where do they go? Do they go to high school games more often, or is it a similar travel sport situation? I would say that would be how you'd get noticed.
Yeah, I actually took a postgraduate year after high school. So I was also recruited late. I guess technically I was a junior, but I was really like a senior. So I took 2 senior years. And I mean, lacrosse specifically, the summer circuit definitely huge. But you know, I personally think the best way to set yourself up for future recruiting is just to perform as well as you possibly can, just for your own team and for your own high school. Because if you get accolades there, you know, those are published online. There's just, I think that's the best way to get noticed, just kind of from a broad viewpoint. And then in the summer is kind of where you get the individualized scouting done by the coaches. But I think me and Dan, that definitely is probably lacrosse specific. I'm not exactly sure how that translates to other sports. But I imagine since everyone has the summer off, summer is probably pretty big for every sport. So make sure, you know, you're prepared for the summer and don't necessarily, I mean, relax, obviously it's your vacation, but just be prepared to perform during the summer as well.
Great. Any other questions from anybody? I don't see anything else in the chat. Okay, I'll start wrapping up, and then if anything else comes up, I'll take a look. But you know, thanks a lot, guys. Hopefully this was enlightening to some people and helpful. I do want to mention that you know, Dan and Scott are both big parts of the 360 program we've got here, and other than, you know, aside from being just kind of excellent, you know, athletic kind of college athletes competing at the high level for both athletics and academics, they are very versed in tutoring. They're going to be very involved in some of the SAT and ACT prep classes we've got coming up. So, you know, you'll see and hear more from them. And I wanted to mention too, obviously with today's, I don't know if maybe some of you have seen it, maybe you haven't, but with the College Board's announcement today about scheduling the first SAT for August 29th, you know, we have a lot of time to prepare. That's important to know. We have a lot of time to prepare. So let's not waste that time. You know, we are going to be putting together a lot of SAT and ACT prep boot camps and classes and courses throughout the month of May and June and into July as well. So kind of stay tuned for some of that. You know, we've talked about a lot about, you know, this week, a lot about how athletics and academics kind of work hand in hand from a recruiting standpoint, just from a readiness standpoint for college. You can't play college sports if you don't keep up with your grades. There is a minimum GPA required to maintain your eligibility from an athletic standpoint. So get ready, get prepared now. And we're here to help you with that. So, you know, stay tuned for some of the different things we're doing. We've got a college essay boot camp starting tomorrow, 4-week series. So there's a lot of things that you guys, you know, you're all high school athletes, or many of you are. You know, I know a lot of people are on you for your academics as well, but, you know, it really is important. If you're going to play college sports, you better be ready academically as well. So take advantage of what we have offering. You're getting emails, you're getting a lot of content thrown your way. It's all here. It's all for your help, to help you guys out. So hopefully take advantage of those things. And like I said, you'll see Scott and Dan more as we get into a lot of this SAT, ACT prep stuff. But thanks a lot, guys, for joining us this evening. Thanks a lot for all the information. Hopefully you guys got something out of this and you put it to good use. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see all of you soon. Have a great night.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Hey.